everybody, welcome to Garden Time with Belle. Today I'm in my greenhouse getting organized because my project for today is to direct sow some seeds into my raised bed garden. It is early March where I live here in Zone 6B in mid-Missouri, and now is the time for me to plant some of my cool weather crops. I've got my seed packets here with me, so let's go through what I'm going to plant today out in my raised bed. I'm going to be planting some Savoy spinach, some arugula, some escarole, some butterhead lettuce, and then this little packet here is just a mesclun mix of just different kinds of lettuces. And actually this little packet here is a gift, shall I say, from Joe Lample. Joe Lample, some of you may know, Joe the gardener. Look him up if you have not discovered him. He has been around in the gardening world for many, many years. I was lucky enough this past, I guess, what would it have been, past fall, to attend one of his seed starting classes. He was here in Columbia, Missouri, and visiting all of us, and he offered a seed starting class, and so it was a thrill to get to go to that class and meet him. I've been following him quite a long time, and so he had given us some seeds to start for lettuces, so I'm going to be growing those. And the other thing I want to get in the ground today too are sugar snap peas, my absolute favorite snack in early spring. Sugar snap peas, as you may or may not know, are the kind of peas where you can eat the entire pod and the peas that are inside. They are delicious, raw, sauteed. Oh, I put them in all kinds of things. And the variety I'm going to grow is from Baker Creek, and that variety is called Sugar Daddy. So come along with me. Let's head out to the garden and I'll show you how I'm going to go about getting these cool weather crops planted so that I will have lots of delicious greens and sugar snap peas in no time. I can't express how much joy it gives me to get in my raised bed garden for the first time this season. Before I get to planting my lettuce and arugula in these two beds, I want to show you what's in here already. So as you can see in this front bed, that is garlic, and I planted that garlic last October. I ended up planting 50 bulbs, 50 cloves, which will turn into bulbs, and garlic takes a long time, so just FYI, I will not be harvesting this garlic until probably June or first week of July. So in this particular bed, the most important thing I want to show you is Jerome. Hey Jerome. So Jerome has come out of my greenhouse and he is going to be hanging out here now, working his garden magic on this particular bed. And if you can see there down the center of this bed, I have some tulips and daffodils coming up. Those have been in this bed. This is like their third year, I think. And so they are coming up. And in the front, just last fall, I planted some hyacinth and muscari bulbs and I don't know, some other things that are pretty purple. So they're in this bed because I use them as cut flowers and rather than having them in the landscape. And as you may know, tulips, especially in my zone 6B, they don't last forever. Daffodils, of course, naturalize and multiply. But anyhow, I don't know. These tulips always come up first, and these, I don't know where they are. They always are a little slow. So we'll see what happens with that. So it's in this bed that I'm planning to plant some of the lettuce and spinach. I think I'm going to just broadcast on one side, one seed, and broadcast on the other. I am going to do succession planting, and that means I'm going to probably just broadcast some seed here and different seed here. Wait a couple weeks, I'll come back and I'll broadcast some more of the same seed on the other side of this little bamboo stake. That way, Succession planting allows for you to harvest some crops, and when you get done with that, a few weeks later, you've got another flush of mature plants to enjoy. So that's going to be my plan for this bed. You'll also see me today plant in this other bed, probably my escarole and arugula. So that'll go in that bed. And then, last but not least, let me see if I can get around here and get my shadow out of the way. So this particular bed, you can see here and here, is pretty great. It's very narrow, and that's on purpose. The reason why that bed is so narrow is that I grow vining crops. You can see we've created a little archway. We just use cattle panels. They work amazingly well for any kind of vertical supports. You can see we've got one on that bed. So we have really found those to be the very best and strongest for growing crops. So today you're going to see me go down just one of these beds and sow some sugar snap peas. And then a couple of weeks later, like that succession planting I mentioned, I'll also put in seeds on this side. So the idea is these will start growing up, and a couple of weeks later, we'll get that growing up, and hopefully they'll create a nice little tunnel of deliciousness. I thought I'd explain some of the supplies I'm going to need for this job, so let's take a look at this particular bed. You can see my kneeler there. This is such a great tool for me. I've got kind of a knee that is challenged, so I'm not young like some of the other gardeners that can just jump up and off of the ground. So this can be a seat if you want it to, where you can sit and work without having to be on your knees. Or as you saw earlier, you just flip it over and you've got a seat there, and you've got handles to push up to get up off the ground if you need it. So that's been a wonderful addition to the garden to make things easier. Work smarter, not harder, I say. Over here in my tub trug, you know I love these little flexible tubs that come in all kinds of fun colors. Anyways, I've just got some supplies down in here. I've got my seed and some gloves. I've got some plant stakes, plant tags, and then I am going to sprinkle just a little bit of garden tone in this bed. As you can see in this particular bed, let me get down here. At the end of last year, I should say at the end of the gardening season, in fall, we shredded lots of leaves. And I like to cover all of my raised beds with finely shredded leaf mulch. It makes a great compost, actually. It will break down and work into the soil. But what I'll probably need to do is I'll probably need to move that out of the way a little bit so I can get down here into the soil in my raised beds to sow the seeds. The other thing that I was going to share with you all is biggest game changer of my gardening experience, and that was to install drip irrigation. And sometime in the next few weeks I'll do a whole video on how we did that. Many of you know how wonderful drip irrigation is on conserving water. It's also wonderful on deeply watering your plants at the root. And you can see I've got some of the tubing from last year. So once I get the lettuce and arugula and things sown in these beds, I will put that drip irrigation back on the bed and pin it down. Not sure that I'm going to turn on irrigation probably for another couple of weeks, but we'll have it ready when we need it. All right, time to get started. That didn't take long to sow some seeds for, let's look in this little bed. On half of it, I've got on one side spinach, and on the other side, I've got some lettuce. And remember, I only put seed in this section, and then in 2 weeks I'll come back and I'll sow the same seed over here, so we'll have succession planting. So this will come up and start to mature, and then a few weeks later we'll have more coming on. And down this long narrow bed you saw me plant sugar snap peas. Boy, they're an easy seed to plant because they're about the size of a little seed. So they're in there and all watered in. And last but not least, in this bed I've got escarole, which is a type of a lettuce, and actually I use it in a lot of Italian dishes. Some wonderful soups and pasta requires escarole, and I can hardly ever find it at the store, so I'm going to grow my own. And then on the opposite side with the escarole, I've got some arugula. Again, I left this section empty. I'll come back in 2 weeks. More escarole on this side and more arugula. We haven't connected our drip irrigation yet. It's early March, so it's still a little too early to do that in my neck of the woods. So now it's off to the compost pile. I had a little bit of refuse and I don't want to waste that, so let's do that next. So you can see here in one of my big tub trugs, I've got some of a little bit of plant material that I don't want to waste, but in this case there's not much of it. So I'm going to throw that on my compost heap, which is over there. Let's see if I can zoom in up against one of our outbuildings. So I need to go do that now. So here we are at my little compost setup. I've got a 3-bin system, and we can talk about composting another time. That's a whole art that I really have not mastered, but I'm doing my part. And so this is the newest plant material, and so I'm going to toss that bucket into there. This needs to be turned. I could probably use this. I think this compost is done, and this is waiting for this spring and summer to build that up. So this is going to go in there and make some black gold. I said I wasn't going to talk about compost, but here I am, getting ready to talk just a little bit about compost. So to make compost, it needs 3 things, or really 4 things. It needs brown material, that's dead things like leaves, dead grass, paper products with no weird inks or anything, shredded paper, cardboard. It needs green things, so green things like kitchen scraps, paper, potato peelings, that kind of thing. Scraps from your garden when you don't use everything, or when you're pulling out the last little bit of scraps, throw those in. It needs air and it needs water. And so you need to water them regularly, your piles. You need to turn them to aerate them, and also place them in some kind of a bin like these that have screen around them. We have never had an issue, even though we're here in the country, we've never had an issue with varmints or weird critters getting in the compost, because we never put any kind of meat products, dairy products, nothing like that would go in the compost heap. Only browns, greens, water, and air. Hey everybody, thanks for hanging out with me today as I got my cool weather crops in my raised bed garden. Oh, I just can't tell you how excited I am to finally get my hands and fingernails dirty again as I get to plant out some crops that we'll be enjoying this spring. You got to come along as I put in some seeds of lettuce, arugula, escarole, and spinach, and I got to plant my favorite spring crop, sugar snap peas, that will grow up and over that trellis that you got to watch. One of the things I don't know that I mentioned, but you saw me sprinkling some garden tone fertilizer into those garden beds, just a little bit to give them a boost. This is an organic fertilizer, and all of my fertilizers that I use on my property are organic. And the great thing about organic fertilizers is they won't burn your plants. They won't hurt little tender plants. So threw some of that in. But the most important thing that for my garden that I like to do for the health of my soil is in the fall, when my raised beds are finished producing for the year, I, of course, weed everything nicely, and then I always put them to rest for the winter with a layer of organic compost, and then on top of that, a layer of leaf litter or leaf mulch or leaf mold, whatever you want to call it. We live on over 10 acres, and so we have plenty of leaves to harvest, and I take those dried leaves and shred them up to a fine shred and top off my garden beds. So all winter long, they're encased in this blanket of compost and leaf litter. Every time it rains, it adds nutrition and organic matter down into the soil. And then come springtime, when it's ready for me to plant, those things stay in the bed and just improve that soil year after year after year. You can't have enough compost or organic matter in your soil. I just think it's really important. So thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I really appreciate your likes if you enjoyed the video. And of course, as always, I encourage you, if you haven't, to subscribe, and encourage your friends to follow along. Subscribing lets me meet more gardeners, gets me out there on YouTube, as well as when you subscribe to my channel, whenever you go on YouTube and tap subscriptions, my content, Garden Time with Belle, will pull up for you, and you don't have to search for it quite as hard. So anyhow, I hope it is a gorgeous spring day wherever you are. It is sunny and beautiful here, and I'm grateful for the change of seasons, as I know most gardeners are so excited this time of year to get out there, get your fingernails dirty, get started growing some beautiful things for you and your family. As always, happy gardening.